let me add one point that neither of us touched on. This is a very political year in China. They are having the 17th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. They don't have elections as we have here, but this is the meeting that determines the leadership structure of China's top leadership organs for the next 5 years. So China is in that pre-17th Party Congress mood at the moment, and it's a very awkward one for them because people are afraid of making a mistake or taking bold measures at the moment according to conventional wisdom. So this, we have to bear that in mind because we're looking at elections next year. That's our sensitive year. For China, this is the sensitive year, and how that will affect their behavior in dealing with these types of economic issues is not easy to forecast, but it's something we have to keep in mind.
Thank you. Before we move to our next question, let me ask the videotape person program, are you able to capture the sound from the questioners? Okay, great. Our next question, yes. Please identify yourself.
Scott Barrell from the Brookings Institution. I have 2 questions. First, for Ambassador Roy, first, thank you very much, sir, for your service to our country. If I were to restate your essential remark, would it be fair to characterize it as you saying essentially China, we best deal with China when we have the executive playing good cop and the Congress playing bad cop? And does that work when the Congress is in the same party, is held by the same party as the executive? It seems that with the rise of Democratic Congress, all the buzz in Washington is finally the Democrats are going to put some pressure on the Republican administration. That seems to be when your model would function best. I wonder if you could give us a reflection on that. From the 2 speakers, both of you were talking about engaging China. It seemed like most of your advice focused on what the United States needs to do. Congressmen need to go to China. We need to understand a better model. Is there anything we can do with the Chinese? And maybe this is best directed to Dr. Pei. What can we best do to get the Chinese to engage back in ways that we want to move them in?
I'll address the first half, and maybe Minxin could take the lead on the second question. This is this good cop, bad cop. Actually, in a rough sense, you could say yes, that's what we're talking about. But in fact, that's not what I'm talking about. If you think of a good cop and a bad cop as both taking extreme positions designed to work toward a goal, maybe that's an effective way to do it. Under certain circumstances, it could be. But I find it is more effective when both the executive branch and the congressional branch are playing what I would call a responsible role. That means you don't drift apart because of some good cop, bad cop syndrome to the point where what's being advocated by either the good side or the bad side gets beyond the practical understanding of how to get where you want to go. I think it's most effective when Congress knows exactly what it's doing and is reinforcing efforts by an administration which is trying to do what the Congress also thinks is in the national interest. The difference is not a good cop, bad cop difference. It's that one is actually the executive branch responsible for negotiating the agreements, and the other can afford to speak without having to actually negotiate that particular arrangement. That means there is some leeway for difference in the tonality with which you address the issues, but you shouldn't let it drift apart as opposed to keeping the focus on the practical accomplishments you want to achieve.
I can only say very briefly on this issue. I would say that the Chinese leadership or the Chinese foreign policy community will have to be even more open than they are today. They are much more open today than they were 30 years ago. And they need to do their part in establishing channels of communication outside the formal government-to-government relationship. I think Brookings and Carnegie and other think tanks in Washington are doing a great deal, but that's not nearly enough. We need to really do even more on our part in Beijing, but the Chinese part will have to do their own lifting as well.
Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Pamela Fan. I work as Senior Counsel for the Congressional Executive Commission on China.
Could you go ahead and stand up, just so we can hear you? Thank you.
I'm Pamela Fan. I work as Senior Counsel for the Congressional Executive Commission on China. We are both congressional and executive. We were established in 2001 by mandate after China acceded to the WTO, part of the decision to grant China PNTR status to monitor human rights and rule of law developments in China on an annual basis. Human rights is traditionally a very sensitive issue for China, as was evidenced this past week after the State Department issued its country report on China. The Chinese came back and issued a report criticizing our human rights situation here. So my question to both of you is, given the nature of our agency, what role can we play, and what's that role mean for engagement with China?
I'll just
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think your agency, your commission, right? Your commission has been doing a splendid job. I think when we talk about engagement, we often forget the adjective before engagement. I'm all for critical engagement. Meaningful engagement with China does not mean that we overlook many of the things that we do not endorse and we often find objectionable about. And human rights is certainly an area, and also certain trade practices. I would also say that because as long as you do a professional job, you base your work on facts gathered in China, and you're not influenced by political partisanship, your work is not just respected by professionals. Your work actually resonates with certain parts of the Chinese government, because within China there are people who want to make their country better, and they will probably use the work you do in internal discussions as arguments for some improvement. So I personally would say just keep doing the great work your commission has been doing.
Let me endorse those comments. I was in China as the deputy in our mission when we had to begin submitting human rights reports on human rights conditions in China. This was back at the end of the 70s, in the beginning of the 80s. And I can remember that when Ambassador Woodcock left office, he received a letter from the Secretary of Human Rights here in Washington expressing amazement that he had submitted such fair and objective descriptions of the human rights situation in China as seen by the U.S. mission there, whereas she had expected the mission to try to cover up what the real situation was. So I would encourage the Commission to not posture on the question. And you can posture on the hard side as well as you can posture on the whitewash side. Try to find as factually accurate a picture of what's going on in China in this area. And as Minxin says, you'll be doing us a favor and you'll be doing China a favor, because objective look at this type of area is important both for governments and for those non-governmental elements who are trying to achieve progress. And believe it or not, it's the Chinese who are most interested in improving human rights in China, but they have to work within their system, and that means they cannot afford to posture on the question. They have to wait their time and then move things forward as rapidly as they can. And in fact, there has been progress if you step back and look at it over a period of time.